Dinesh. But it's also a Herculean task because Vicky sent me a note which said Dinesh Kanabar, founder of Dhruva Associates, Advisors LLP. I tried to dig out information. I tried again. Abuzar sent me the same information. So I called up Dinesh, a very modest man. He says, that's enough. Say I'm a Rotarian. So I looked at the roster. Married to Seema, daughters Dhruvi and Disha. So I said, okay, Dhruva Advisors LLP must have come from Dhruvi. Which again, I called him up and he said, no, it's not from Dhruvi. It's from the founder members of Dhruva Advisors. Then, of course, he was a little more forthcoming. And it's really a very illustrious man. And as Rohit said, he's a very busy man. He has been a Deputy CEO of KPMG. He's been the chairman of the KPMG Tax Committee, Practices Committee. He's been the Deputy CEO of RSM and Company, head tax of PricewaterhouseCoopers. And he's on various committees at all times. National Executive Committee of FICCI. He's been a mentor to the FICCI's Taxation Committee. He's been on several committees of Government of India. And we don't want to recount those. What we want to recount is to hear what he has to say. He's been member of the Raja Rangachari Committee on Tax Reforms. He's been the winner of Asia's Tax Practitioners Leaders of the Year 2020, as recent as 2020. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a privilege to present our very own Rotarian, the Bhishma Pitama of taxation matters, Dinesh Kanabar. We look forward to your talk, sir.
Thank you so much, Anil. And as I said, when you introduce a fellow Rotarian, all that you need to say is he's a Rotarian and nothing else. You don't need to be very profound in all those introductions. If an outsider comes in, that's well worth it. So it's a pleasure, honor, and a delight to be amongst all of you. You know, when Vicky called me up and said, Dinesh, how about talking to the Rotary Club on the budget? And we are discussing on the dates. And as it happens, today is the 24th. And I was telling Vicky that, Vicky, we are at a time and age when the budget gets analyzed, dissected, commented upon in 24 hours. And if you're looking at 24 days to do that, by that time it's history. Nobody even remembers what happened. So we are in a day and age where doing something 24 days later is probably of no consequence at all. And so what Vicky said is that, Dinesh, while we talk about the budget, can we go beyond the budget? Can we talk about what does this mean to us in the long term? What does it entail? And that's what I will try and do over the next half an hour. I must tell you that I am no economist. I must tell you that I am no stock market expert. So with those caveats, let me begin. You know, let's see what was the scenario before the budget, and that's quite important because that will set the stage of what this budget means and where does it go forward. So before the budget was presented, there were 2-3 things which were of note. One was that there was a huge amount of rumor mongering going on as to what new taxes will be introduced in the budget. In fact, everybody and his brother were sort of very clear that the government is going to increase the rate of tax by 2% by putting a surcharge for COVID. And then there were people who were going on talking about how government could introduce wealth tax, and there were calculations galore to say if the government introduced a one-time wealth tax of 1% or whatever, then how much money could government collect because of the stock market capitalization of many of the companies. And then there was again this whole rumor which keeps on coming just before every budget for the last 10 years, that is the government going to introduce inheritance tax in this budget. And I remember the budget was being presented at 11 o'clock. At about 10:15, I was on CNBC and I was being asked this question as to what taxes will be introduced. And I said that, look at last 10 years and look at whatever predictions people have done before the budget and what actually comes in the budget. And any resemblance between what was predicted and what actually comes is purely coincidental and unintended. So people engage in this gossip and then life simply moves on. But on a more serious note, what you saw was that the direct tax collections are down this year by almost 23%, which is quite a lot. Almost a quarter of direct taxes collection have gone down compared to the preceding year, which shows that people have been making losses, or that the earnings of corporates have gone down. And very curiously, whilst for the first 8 months of the year from April onwards, one saw GST collections again being very poor, the last 2 months had suddenly seen a revival. So the collections for the month of December and for the month of January were in excess of 110,000 crores, some sort of record out there. So there was sort of indications that there was a revival of demand. And in that state, the question which came in is, what would the government do? Because it was very clear that the government had, so to say, two paths. One was to try and collect more taxes because that is what was needed for government coffers to be filled up. Another was to say the government could put an expansionist program to grow the economy, and taxes could be a consequence of that growth as opposed to taxes being levied in excess. And I'm really glad that the government chose the expansionist plan. So the entire budget, and this is probably one of those very rare budgets, if at all there has ever been, where there has been no change in taxes at all. The taxes just continue as it is. Sure, there were expectations that the exemption limit will be increased. That has not happened. There was sort of an expectation that the first slab rate would be reduced so that there is more money in the hands of people, which could revive the demand and all of that. But the government said simply, we are not going to put this 2% extra tax. No, nothing. The rates are as it is. And instead, the government went down the path of putting an expansionist of the economy to say, if the economy expands, people earn more, then taxes will be a logical consequence. And therefore, let's look at what is it that the government did. What is it that is likely to happen as a result of the government proposals, and how do we see the next 12 months span out? So one was that the stock market the week before the budget was unusually down every single day. So the whole week the markets were going down, and when the budget was announced, the markets sort of started rocketing. We saw a 5% increase on that day, and then since then the market has been consistently going up. People have been putting up all those eulogies, that's a 21 gun salute and whatever else. So we saw two extremes. One was an apprehension before the budget, that what would the budget do, and therefore the markets going down, and the euphoria post the budget, and probably both of those maybe are not warranted. But let's move from there. What we have seen is that the government, as I mentioned earlier, has not made any changes in the rates of taxes at all. But in contrast, the government said that we have to raise resources, and those resources are going to be raised as a result of privatization, disinvestment that we are going to do. And again, this was probably the first budget in post-independence India that the word privatization has actually been used. Until now, the government spoke about disinvestment, which essentially meant that some part of the shares of a government entity would be sort of given to the public or maybe sold to another public sector enterprise. Now we're talking of actual privatization. So what the government has come back to say is that we need resources, and we will raise those resources by privatizing maybe two public sector banks, apart from IDBI Bank, which was supposed to have been privatized this year, but has been pushed back. We'll continue our efforts to privatize Air India. We'll privatize one of the general insurance companies, and BPCL, which again is has been on a back burner. So the government basically came back to say that we expect to raise about 1,75,000 crores on account of all the privatization that we have set out to do. And that was not all, that was just one part of the budget. And then the government spoke about highways, how about 38,000 kilometers of new roads will be built. But more important, government came back to say that the existing roads will be again monetized using REITs or InvIT structure, and funds will be raised overseas. So net, if you combine these two, you are looking at 2,10,000 crores of funds being raised by the government next year. So what does that do to the GDP? Before the budget was presented, there was an apprehension that the GDP of the country would contract by roughly about 9.5% this year. Because of the revival of demand, it was now expected that the economy would shrink by 7.5%. And if the government is able to implement everything that it has been talking about in terms of privatization, spend the money on infrastructure, we'll come to that in a moment, then the economy is scheduled to grow by about 11.5%. And that's not government's own estimation, that's also the estimation of the World Bank. And to put it in a context, if your economy shrank by about 8% in 2020-21 and grew by about 11.5% in 21-22, then over this 2-year period, you achieved a net annual growth of about 2.5%. So that's where we are compared to where we were earlier, where we grew at about 5, 6, 7%, depending on which year you are looking at. Now you're looking at, for these 2 years, about 2.5%. That's what we are looking at. And the government announced a series of measures for infrastructure development. Very, very interesting. So the government said that we are going to set up a development financial institution, a DFI, and this DFI will be funded about 27,000 crores of rupees over a 5-year period. And obviously, if the funding of a DFI is 27,000 crores, then it can borrow maybe 5 times that amount, and therefore that's the amount sort of which we will raise and we will put into development of infrastructure. And herein lies probably one of the rubs of the entire budget, which is that will the government be able to privatize what it is seeking out to do? Because unless that privatization happens, unless the realization of the funds happens, the government may not find it at all possible or practicable to really spend the money on infrastructure development, which is one of the key things that the government is looking to do to revive the economy, to kickstart the economy, to give us 11.5% growth next year. Now, when you speak about whether the government will or will not be able to go about on privatization, 2 things come up. One is the government's past track record. And I must confess that that track record has not been encouraging at all. So in the past, every single year, virtually the government has missed out on privatization targets. And even where it has only been able to really sell one private sector to another. So an HPCL being sold to an ONGC, etc. The government's own ability to really sell and realize monies from private sector has thus far not been very encouraging. Will it happen this time? And the government came back to say that what we are wanting to do is to set up an independent company, which is really going to go like Margaret Thatcher way and sort of ensure that privatization happens. Reportedly, the government is in the process of setting up a committee to do that. But it'll be interesting to see whether this will happen or this will not happen. And I'll tell you why this could be a question mark. I'm not saying it will not happen. I'm just trying to put out some of the difficulties with the government may face. So the government is looking to privatize 2 of the public sector banks. Now, will it privatize those banks which have got larger share of non-performing assets? If it is so, it will not get a right price. Let's assume it tries to privatize those banks which are in a good shape. What's going to happen? One of the biggest strengths of public sector banks has been that they have got a huge branch network, length and breadth of the company, and that has been their strength. And over a period of time, that strength probably has become a weakness thanks to the evolution of technology. Fintech has come in. People are moving more and more towards no need for a physical branch infrastructure. And therefore, a question is that if today the government goes out and wants to sell 2 of the public sector undertakings, how many foreign buyers, and this will largely be foreign buyers, because the Indian buyers may actually not want to buy a bank because the bank licenses are, so to say, available on that app. I'm not saying they will not do it at all, but they are less likely to do it because their ability to get a license is very much there. Whereas for a foreign bank, it would be very, very attractive to buy an infrastructure and develop it. But will people be willing to pay at this point of time for a bank infrastructure, a physical infrastructure, which actually can be substituted by just technology? Remains to be seen. Similarly, BPCL was to have happened 6 months back, hasn't happened thus far. LIC, very, very important. In fact, a large chunk of the money that the government is trying to look at is privatization of LIC, offering maybe 10-15% stake. That's something which is very likely to happen. GIC, one of the GIC companies, I don't know whether it will happen, not happen, what will be the sort of interest. But the entire thrust of the budget and its ability to deliver the growth which the government is promising, in some sense, hinges on how much privatization can happen. The government has also announced and taken a bold step, if I may say so, to come up with the bad bank concept. Now it's again put only as a concept. One needs to really evolve to see what is it that the government will do on this. So what the government has said is that we'll set up an asset reconstruction company, an ARC, which is going to sort of take over NPAs from banks. Again, announcements are still trickling in. One has to see what sort of things will come. Will it take on only, like today's newspaper seems to suggest, it's only going to be NPAs, which are actually written off from the books and nothing else? Will that serve any purpose? Not so. Will these ARCs be able to realize monies any better than what banks have been able to do? Remains to be seen. So a large thrust, as I said, on the revenue side is on privatization, and on the expenditure side, and where the government wants to really revive the economy, is on the basis of expenditure on infrastructure. Again, number of measures announced in the context of healthcare, etc. I won't go into all of them. I'm sure you are aware of all of that. What would be the big ticket misses before I come to the tax proposals and what do they mean to each one of us? I think one of the very important thrust of the government has been Atmanirbhar Bharat, and that's a very, very laudable initiative. The government wants to make in India. The government wants production to happen. The government, before the budget, announced several PLIs, production-linked incentive schemes. The aggregate expenditure on production-linked incentive scheme is of the order of about 1,76,000 crores. These are still being rolled out in a variety of sectors, ranging from automobile components to pharmaceuticals, etc. And the government's effort is to say that the manufacturing hub today, which resides in China, can we attract some part of it? And I must say that if I had to look at one big miss within this budget, is that there is nothing at all in this budget to sort of promote that Atmanirbhar and make people manufacture in India. The budget, interestingly, has a very interesting proposal of setting up 6 textile hubs. So government has come back to say we'll set up hubs where textile can manufacture, which is a good thing. And I think that is the path that the government needs to go down to. If you look today, the rates of tax in India for corporates is probably one of the lowest in the world. So if you are a manufacturing company and you have been set up after October 2019, then the rate of tax applicable to you on your manufacturing profit is just 15%. It can't get better than that. If you are an existing company, then you have got a tax rate of 25 to 35%, depending on whether you are choosing to avail of incentives or not. Choice is up to the company. So I don't think anything was warranted on the rates of tax for corporates. But what indeed I was hoping to see is the government talking about setting up of industrial zones, which are virtually plug and pay. So as I speak, for example, to Terry Gao, who's the CEO of Foxconn, and he says about how China has been able to attract manufacture and has been able to really leapfrog there, is that they set up industrial parks. You just come, everything is ready, all infrastructure. You plug in and start working. You don't need approvals. They are all available, single window. And I think India has a lot to do there, and that is not what I have seen. The second thing which I think is not necessarily a budget issue, but I do wish that budget had addressed, was on the MSME sector. Through the budget, we have seen large corporates being able to emerge relatively unscathed and grow. We have seen, for example, what Reliance has been able to do. We have been able to see what Adanis have been able to do, etc. But MSMEs are really bleeding. And one of the things which was announced by the government when it announced the 20,000 lakh crore fusion of funds was MSME, which hasn't happened. All that has happened on MSME is to lend them to rotate their existing loans, which has not taken them anywhere. And I was hoping that the government would come up with something far more concrete to address the MSME sector. The organized sector is doing very well for itself, barring a few sectors. And the third thing which government probably did not address at all, which is the sectors which have been very badly hit, whether it is the tourism sector, whether it is the airline sector, which have been bleeding very badly. And one was hoping there'd be something specific to address their bleeding. One did not see that. Coming to some of the tax proposals, and I would not be too technical here, a very, very good directional change. I haven't seen a government really come back with a number of directional changes which are as positive as one has seen in this budget. And let me illustrate a few of them. So we are talking that if you are a pensioner and you are more than 75 years in age, and your only income is by way of pension or interest on that pension, then you don't need to file your tax return. Very laudable. There are some glitches in the drafting, but I'm sure that can be addressed. But again, an approach to say that the senior citizens in this country need to be taken out of the rigors of filing cumbersome tax returns, very, very welcome. Or for example, propositions which have come in this budget and slightly before that, which is on the faceless assessment, which is to go back and say that there is no reason why faceless assessment or appeals, and this budget speaks now about tribunals appeal also being faceless. So you don't have to wait outside a tax officer, it's all faceless. You don't have to worry about somebody wanting to do things for ulterior motives, etc., because there is no really assessing officer, a matter to matter. Somebody is looking at you and sort of dealing. Very, very important. Or a very interesting proposition which has come in for the first time for relatively small taxpayers, which is to say that if you have returned an income of less than 50 lakhs of rupees and the variation which the tax officer wants to make is less than 10 lakhs of rupees, then instead of going through a complicated 10-year litigation, you simply need to go to an alternative dispute mechanism which the government is going to lay out and resolve your issue and simply move on with life. Very, very welcome. And then a very, 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 very interesting proposition to say that as of now, if you got your tax assessment, you are never really able to sleep in peace because the tax office could reopen that assessment for a period of 6 years. That 6 years has been reduced to 3 years again. Extremely, extremely welcome. And I keep on getting asked this question that how do you look at the tax proposals? And as I mentioned earlier, that in terms of intention, in terms of what the government is trying to do, I haven't seen a better set of proposals. What does worry me is how will it get implemented? So for example, a faceless can be a very nice thing because sort of it frees you maybe from corruption and whatever else. But will it mean that an officer whom you find it even difficult to explain something sitting across the table will actually not care to understand your proposition when you put it on paper and make random disallowances? If that happens, then the intention of the scheme will be good, but the actual implementation may not be that good. Or for example, when you speak about the reopening period being reduced from 6 years to 3 years, there is a 10-year window if there is a fraud, and that has been now, the definition of fraud has been expanded. So will the tax office actually try and put everybody there? So again, just as a person who is practicing taxes now for close to 40 years, I go on saying that tax is not about really the policy. The policy framework is reasonably good. It's really how do people on the ground implement that policy, and are they really aligned to the government's vision, or the government keeps on making grandiose plans and implementation goes for haywire. So again, it remains to be seen. You know, when I look at how the stock market has behaved, and you know, before this talk started and everybody converged, I was being asked this question, that is this budget good or bad? You know, I'm reminded that in the private equity world, when a person makes an investment and it's $1 billion investment, your photograph comes on the first page of Business Today or whatever else. And actually that's of no consequence because you just put money out of your pocket. It is really whether that investment is right or wrong a few years later that you got to be photographed and saying, wow, what an investment, and it turned out to be right. And I think the true test of whether this budget is a great budget or not will come 10 months, 11 months from now when we head to the next year and see whether we are able to implement this budget right or not. If we have been able to implement, this will be an outstanding budget, a budget which will be remembered in a long, long time as being a reformist budget. If not, we'll have a lot of egg on our face. And I hope and wish that for the sake of all of us, it is the former and not the later. I hope I've been able to be within my time limit, Vicky, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Totally. Well within time, and we were hoping you would proceed for longer, you know, because
oh, don't worry, I could actually speak for the next 2 hours, but that's not what you want.
Question.
Okay. Let me put it on gallery view for the questions.
Yes, can I ask a question?
Yes, Aditi, please go ahead.
Yes. The government has been trying to privatize Air India for last 3-4 years and not succeeded. Would it not be possible for them to lease it to overcome the problems?
You know, leasing of aircraft, you can't lease a company, you can lease aircraft. And the value of Air India comes from the slots that it has got. So the flying rides that it has got to various countries, etc., etc. There is nothing wrong with being able to privatize Air India. There are two things which are barriers and which is why government has not been successful. One is that the airline has huge amount of debt and nobody is going to take on all that debt which represents past losses. So one needs to really ensure that whoever comes in takes on only a reasonable burden of debt. And the second thing is that probably Air India has the largest manpower to passenger ratio in the world. And the whoever buys it has to have the ability to rationalize that. Otherwise, it's the whoever is the buyer is going to inherit the same problems which Air India has. So if the government addresses these two things, it will be able to sell Air India. And Adit, if I may just make a comment, whether or not government realizes huge money on sale of Air India, if it is able to sell the airline, it will stop losing that 20,000-30,000 crores each year, which money can go into development project rather than be a loss to the exchequer.
Vicky, you can unmute and.
Yes. Any more questions?
Yes,
I have
Vicky,
one, Vicky.
I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead, Jamshid.
Yeah, sure. Jamshid?
Yeah, hi, Dinesh. It was a very good talk. And you had rightly brought about touched on the topic of the MSMEs, which are the backbone of employment in the country, and how they have been sort of, given a raw deal or not given any deal at all. The other issue that a lot of MSMEs are struggling with is that day by day compliance burdens are going through the roof. And although government is saying ease of doing business, nothing is really happening on that front. Any comments?
So the one proposal in this budget, which I did not talk about, which the government has introduced is one-person company. In essence, you are now talking about a single shareholder company, which will be permitted, with which the compliance burden will be minimum. Now, again, it remains to be seen how the new compliance regime is rolled out. Again, as I said, it's not the government policies, it's really the implementation of the policies. So let me put it to you this way. Our Companies Act and the compliance that we have is no more burdensome that you will find probably in Singapore. It's that, so I must share this with you. I have an office in Singapore, a subsidiary in Singapore, and we filed a tax return for that subsidiary day before yesterday. And in the evening, we got a mail from the Singapore government to say, ordinarily, we are supposed to confirm to you by the end of the day whether we found anything prima facie wrong. Our systems are down. We are very apologize to you, and we'll come back to you in 2 days' time. Now, can you think of that in India? You know, I would be actually happy to share that email. You know, it's amazing that you can get a mail from the government to say, you filed your return today. I was supposed to come back to you by the end of the day whether there was anything wrong. I'm sorry, my systems are a little bit tracking, and I'll give us 2 more days and we'll come back. So it's really about the approach and implementation. There's nothing wrong about what we have to file. Really, do our systems stack up to that filing? You know, I didn't speak to you at all about GST, for example. We have a situation where some of our clients could not upload the GST return at the end. So we have an automobile manufacturer, a large manufacturer, who for whatever reason could not upload the return on that day, last day, and it got uploaded next day. And thousands of vendors could not get credit. Now, whom will you blame for that? So we have those issues really. So I think on MSME, my proposition is that the government needs to do a lot more because they are truly burdened, debt, etc. Compliance is one of those smaller things which is more an attitude issue as opposed to a law issue.
Vicky, I have a question. Can I ask?
Well spoken. The next question is Kamlesh Bhai, but before that, if I may add about Singapore, my son is recently gone to Singapore for pursuing his undergrad education. And the visa process that he went through, the MOE from Singapore directly gave the visa. And during the COVID times, they told us the exact date after 10 days that they will issue the visa, and the window after 5 days that he has to leave the country, and he will be received over there and quarantined for so many days. And the entire process was meticulously followed by them without any delay, something that I found impossible to do by, maybe in India or any other, ordinary country. So they are totally fabulous. I totally agree with you, the way Singapore manages their commitments. I will take the next question to Kamlesh Bhai, Kamlesh Sonawala. Thank you, Kamlesh Bhai.
Dinesh Bhai, good to see you. Question I have is, with the petrol prices going up so much, the inflation seems to go up and will go up. Rupee, I do not know how strong it will remain. It will become weak, I think. In this condition, lots of promises which look good. If only half of them, if they make a realistic thing and try to do at least half of the things, at least we will survive. Right now, it seems that there are lots of promises, but I don't see anything in the real life which there is a hope. So what is your comments on this?
Kamlesh Bhai, first of all, I hope your health is all good and nice to see you here. On the petrol prices, government has used this as a revenue raising measure. Our prices are not in line with the global crude prices movement. It's been one area where government has been To your point about inflation, I might actually add a little bit more. Let us assume that the government is unable to raise resources on privatization. It has to balance the budget. Where will that money come from? And that money will therefore come from Reserve Bank of India, either by way of borrowing or dipping into the Reserve Bank of India resources. And if either of that happens, we could have a huge inflation pull. But more important, Kamlesh bhai, and this is sort of not merely from an Indian perspective, but from a global perspective, with such a lot of liquidity, which USA has put around the world, which other countries have put on stimulus, you can say that in the next 2 years, money is going to be the cheapest thing, and assets are the only thing which are going to grow in value. So the value of the money will come down more and more because of the infusion of liquidity, number one. Number two, because of inflation, and assets are going to continue to rise. And the other comment I would make is that given the fact that the government wants to raise whatever amount on disinvestment, 2,10,000 crores, whatever, so to say, if I may say, government has no option but to ensure that the stock market continues to boom. Because unless that happens, how will you really sell those assets and put the right price? So it'll be an interesting next couple of years to see.
Thank you.
Vicky, I have one question.
May I ask?
I think next is Manoj Jalan. Manoj, can you?
Dinesh bhai, in fact, last couple of days we've been reading the papers that the toll collection on the highways, ever since FASTag has been made more mandatory, it's almost 100 crores a day, and that's still at 90% FASTag collection. And probably the figure was less than half not too long ago. That means there were tremendous leakage in the whole system of collection of money on the highways. So if you're talking about 40,000 crores of money being collected only on the highways, you think that money will only go for the high level development or also can be diverted for the other development part of the country? And, that's a huge figure that we're talking about. I mean, was that accounted for in the budget, this kind of a collection?
So it's a very, very, very interesting question, Manoj. And rather than just answer on the highway toll collection, let me probably put a more broader perspective. The one area where government has done better than the private sector is on digitization and on use of artificial intelligence. So today, for example, the amount of data that government has on each one of us, which is almost like what you had in USA. So in USA, you fear the IRS, not because of their actions, but because of the fact that they've got all the information, and should you not report something, they will catch you. We are somewhere coming to that situation where on account of the information that the government is collecting on GST, on income tax, virtually everything that you do is being monitored. Do we still have a parallel economy running? The answer is yes. Is it going to be more and more difficult for that parallel economy to continue to be there? The answer is again absolutely yes. So when you look at FASTag, Manoj, you're looking at basically government wanting to ensure that there is no cash in the system. Everything that happens digitally. That thrust is going to continue. That will indeed increase the revenues, whether it is on account of toll collection, whether it is on account of GST. So one of the reasons why the GST collections have gone on month, 1 lakh crore, 1,10,000, 1,20,000 crore is not merely picking up of the demand. Every single day you are reading about how people are being raided for fake GST invoices, fake turnover, etc. So digitization is the way the government will go forward. Digitization is the way government will have information on each one of us, and that is the way government revenues will definitely improve.
Rohit bhai, did you have a question?
Vicky, can I ask?
Yes, after Rohit bhai.
Dinesh bhai, it's an excellent presentation you made today. I have one problem with this budget, that faceless tribunal hearing. Do you think it will succeed? Because person will not get a chance to appeal on something, a person will not able to put his argument, and tribunal decision final.
No, thank you, Rohit Bhai, for that question, and I hope all is well with you. Let me put a perspective, and I'm an eternal optimist. So when the government brings about a change, my approach is to say, sure, it will result in something positive, rather than be negative to say nothing is going to happen. When you speak about income tax tribunals becoming faceless, what does that mean? In essence, what it means is that you are going to make a representation to the tribunal virtually like this. You will see a blank screen and you don't know who are the people. You will argue what you want to argue virtually. Your arguments will be heard. So today, for example, you have a Bombay tribunal and a Bangalore tribunal and a Delhi tribunal. Day after tomorrow, what will happen is when your matter comes, there will be one guy from Delhi, one guy from Calcutta, hearing you who is based in Bombay. And you will put your arguments, you will be heard, and a decision will come out. And I can't see any reason why it can't happen. Now, having said that, let me put a counter. This morning, I was arguing a matter before the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, and we have still not reached faceless. We have got a virtual tribunal, not a faceless tribunal. So today, when I argue virtually, I can see the members relate to them. And the representative of the tax officer, I'm talking about this morning, got up to say that I need to take an adjournment because this is a matter relating to transfer pricing. It is very complex. I can't explain this virtually. I need a face-to-face hearing. So if the tax office is not prepared to argue matters virtually with a face around, how will they be prepared to argue matters faceless is one question. Second is that constitutionally there appears to be a question mark as to whether a faceless tribunal could be regarded as giving an effective opportunity to be heard, which is required in law. Evolving thing, but theoretically, I do not see any reason why faceless tribunal. You don't need you just need a computer screen so long as you know that there are two people. There are practical issues which can arise. So, for example, you don't know who's on the other side. So, is somebody influencing the other side? You don't know. If you have to cross-examine somebody, so for example, somebody has given a statement against you and that's being used against you, how will a cross-examination happen? It has to evolve, and it's a long way away. It's a long, I think, as we always say, that you first need to walk before you run. Faceless assessments have started just about 2 months back, and we are going to faceless tribunal. Probably we need to give this a year to settle down before we start going down this path.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mohan, do you have a question? Mohan Shani? Did I see Mohan, you're on mute. Mohan, you're on mute, Mohan.
Yeah, I requested Anil Lambu.
Yes. Okay. I think Mohan is trying to unmute himself. In the meanwhile, Anil, why don't you ask your question?
Dinesh, I personally believe man-to-man Indians are too good. But as a system, we fail. The system fails. And in your entire talk, you have made one comment. If implementation. Now, what is the government doing for a different mindset, training, retraining, mentoring people to look differently? Like, for example, I'll tell you, my mother's case of income tax, 3 years back, TDS cut from an NSS. And she's 93 years old. For 3 years, I've been reminding they don't take action. I wrote to the Prime Minister. And now suddenly, while we're talking, he's saying, sir, it will be done today, it will be done tomorrow. That's not the way it should be. That should not be the way. It should be on merit. So what is the government doing to prepare people for this kind of?
Anil, two things. First, technology is a great leveler. And over a period of time, when technology becomes far more robust, your need to interact will go away. And when your need to interact will go away, you will be able to get far more effective results from technology. There's another comment I would make, Anil. You are telling me that you went to the PMO and then things started to move. But was that possible 5 years back? 5 years back, you could go and you had no PMO to talk to, and nobody would. So thank God we have moved. At least there is a threat of a danda and people are moving. Technology will take it over and things will improve then, Anil. That's all that I can tell you. But coming to a larger point, Anil, and I wish I have an answer to give you. The mindset of the bureaucracy is not changing.
Yes.
Bureaucracy is about power. By definition, if you have power in your hands, you would not want to let it go. That tug of war is continuing. And again, the only remedy to that is technology and nothing else.
Very true.
Good answer. Mohan has a question. Mohan?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, Mohan. Please go on.
Okay. Dinesh bhai,
Yes, please.
can you hear me, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay, so my question is that the stock market gains, what we see very recently, could be partly cyclical and therefore potentially they'll come down. Secondly, what is there after the 8-10 months of lockdown? Corporates had problems, business could not have grown. What could be the possibility? What is there in the budget that will help the stock market to continue to go up? Therefore, my forecast, sir, is that it has to come down very sharply sooner than later. Your opinion, sir?
I am the last person to comment on stock market. I'm not a stock market expert, Mohanji. But all that I would say is a few things. First is that there is huge amount of infusion of liquidity globally into the markets. So you have lots of money chasing the same assets. And so it's not that one can go only on the basis of liquidity. Somewhere the fundamentals and the liquidity need to converge. But today there is a pressure of liquidity which is chasing the assets. That's number one. Number two, if as we say, and the World Bank is saying this, not our government saying this, that India is poised to grow 11.5% next year. If that happens, that means that the profitability of the global of the Indian enterprises will go up. Without that, you can't have a growth of 11.5%. That's a humongous growth. It's the highest growth projected in the world. So as I said, I am no expert on stock exchange, but all that I can tell you is that there is enough and more happening on the fundamental side and on the liquidity side. And government will want to do everything and more to prop up or keep the stock markets propped up because it is in their selfish interest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well answered. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, Aditi, go ahead.
In view of the fact that they have said no more than 3 years opening up of the accounts, can we destroy all the ones before, all the books?
The answer has to be yes, indeed. Again, Aditi, 2 comments. Practically, we are seeing that the tax office is rushing before 31st March to reopen as many assessments as they can with the 6-year window. So this is the ground level reality. But leaving that aside, from next year, you will be required to keep your books only for 3 years, except if there is a major fraud issue.
Okay.
And therefore, beyond 3 years, you don't need your records. But remember that there is one time limit under income tax. If you happen to be a company, there's a different time limit under the Companies Act. You might be subjected to different, GST might have something different. So you need to read the longest of all of them and really retain your record.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, Dinesh ji, and one is, so the Farm Bill. It's not a budget question, but the Farm Bill is so confusing. I mean, from the educated class point of view, as I see it, it's a very good thing that's happening to the country. Farmers can sell their produce globally into any markets. But still, there are so many protests happening, and there are other educated class people who are favoring the farmers and asking the bill to be taken back. So what is your opinion on this? One question. Then Okay, I'll ask the next after this.
So again, the farm bill can be viewed through multiple lenses. I was with a group of friends on a virtual meeting the other day, probably representing some of the biggest industrialists across the length and breadth of the country, people whose opinions matter, etc., and people who not necessarily speak out of self-interest, people who do things in the rural areas, etc. And the one view which seemed to emerge consistently across everybody, that is this a farmer's agitation or this an agitation by 1.5 states? And again, I don't want to, I'm not a politician, so I'm not trying to make this from a political perspective. But the fact of the matter seems to be that the farmers who are agitating represent 1.5 state, and to say that this is a farmer's agitation, there may be a little bit of a challenge out there because it's not across the length and breadth of the country. Second, we have seen sharp division of views as to whether this is beneficial or not beneficial. You know, many of us, so the couple of questions which came was about implementation. So in the context of budget, the question was, will the government be able to implement? And Vicky, one of the issues on implementation is the ability to carry people along. If you are running an organization, you learn how to carry people along. The one thing with the government seems to have failed in the context of the farm bill is to carry people along. Probably ordinance, rushing through the whole thing was not a right way to do it. So personally, if you ask me, I would like to believe this is a wonderful reform. I would actually subscribe to the view that if this reform is pushed back, the government's ability to implement many other reforms which are pending for many years will be sort of at risk. The government should not push back, but I think the government needs to get a broader buy-in.
Yeah, I have a question, another question.
Just a minute. Well answered. And my second question I would like to ask you, you know, many of our Rotarians have been, are in the senior citizen, and we have been enjoying our income from renting of commercial space. And we have been quite happy with this, also the rent yield, and also with the growth in appreciation of the commercial spaces year after year. In the light of what has happened in the last 9 months, where Zoom has and virtual meetings have taken off, and many of the office corporates are contemplating working from home, even as a continuation plan. What is your opinion and forecast you feel that the commercial office space will have in going ahead from now?
You know, Vicky, it's actually a question which I'm personally grappling with for my own organization. So I have an office in One India Bulls, and it's about a 30,000 square feet office. And the question is, on a going forward basis, I happen to have Blackstone as my landlord, and Blackstone isn't budging an inch in terms of reducing the rentals. So a question comes up as, and I don't think there is an easy or a one-size-fits-all answer. There are processes which can be done remotely, can be done from home. So if, for example, you are an IT-enabled services, BPO, large part of the work, which is repetitive in nature, which can be measured, can be done from home. But I look at my own thing, you know, we are into tax and regulatory advice, we work on M&A, we work on succession planning. And right in the middle of pandemic, we have people flying down from Delhi, from Hyderabad, from wherever else to come and consult on matters which they want our opinion. And there is certain amount of things which a physical interaction can do, with just an interaction virtually may not be able to do. Second is, how will the newer generation develop connects, EQ? Will it be virtually? How do they get connected? So I think on a going forward basis, I can see that there is going to be a mix and match. The necessity on physical infrastructure might go down, But to say that businesses are going to move virtual may be an exaggeration. How will this mix and match evolve remains to be seen, but it's going to be a mix and match, certainly.
So even if it is a certain percentile, that would change the dynamics of, could change the future dynamics of income from commercial space based investments, probably.
It certainly could. It certainly could. Again, Vicky, I am no real estate expert, but today, again, as you see the mix of how real estate is moving between cities, large cities and smaller cities, I am seeing actually a real boom in second tier cities, the Jaipurs and the Indores and whatever Raipurs of the world compared to what you see in Mumbai. So it's yes, the dynamics will change. And if you are not alive to those dynamics, you are missing out on something.
Okay, great. Last question. I think Anil Lambo has a repeat question.
The last time I met you, Dinesh, was when you spoke at the Taj Hotel on a similar subject. And at the end of the meeting, you made a promise that maybe you will come sometime or the other. So when is the next time we'll see you? Because we do not want to miss out on your...
Anil, apologies, that point is well made, and I will try and see that I'm able to be more regular than what
At least once a month, we'd like to see you in the Zoom meeting.
Look forward. Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you. I'll remember that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And with
Vicky, can I put in ask a quick point?
Definitely, Jamshid.
Yeah, thanks. Dinesh, you mentioned about this one-person company. Is there any clarity on when that will happen, and that existing companies can also convert into that?
Nothing has been announced. What has come in the budget at this point of time is a statement of intent, where two things have been mentioned: that you can have a one-person company, and that the compliance requirements for that company will be very, very minimal. What that will be, I don't know. Whether the existing companies can convert, merge, we have to wait for the framework to emerge.
Thank you.
Dinesh bhai, I want one clarification.
Rohit bhai, you're muted.
1 minute. Regarding maintenance of the books, 3 years is enough, or 6 years should be kept for the time being?
So for the past assessments, Rohit bhai, for up to 31st March 20, you need to keep for 6 years. From 1st April, it will be 3 years.
Okay, for the next future, it will be 3 years.
That's
understood. Thank you.
That was a well answered, direct question, and well answered. Thank you. So with that, I will take this session to a close. And Dinesh bhai, you've been very meticulous and very detailed and very clear. It was much needed. Even though budget was 24 days ago, we feel it was just 24 hours ago after you've spoken to us. So thank you.
Your experience and knowledge, Dinesh bhai, we would like to share. So please be with us. If not every month, at least every quarter.
Sure.
Once a month he's promised.
I second that, Dinesh. Wonderful hearing you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Totally.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky.
And after this, I will ask Berger, our Vice President and President-elect, to do the vote of thanks for Dinesh Kanabar.
Pleasure. Well, Dinesh bhai and I go back a long time. And from what you have seen him make such a difficult task so simple is one of the best accolades to explain, besides introducing him as a Rotarian. He has this wonderful aura around him when a client comes all sweating with files in his hand and completely wondering what the answer will be and what his opinion will be. His usual smile straight away puts you at ease. And he simply says, I think you're making a very big deal out of it. And then slowly, you'll go into the detail and will show his mastery. Well, he has in no small way shown it today. He's all made it seem so simple. The budget, as he's explained, is expansionist and challenging. And I think he very succinctly put in that what needs to be done is the implementation. I think the government has also taken a cue of the COVID and pandemic and seen that despite all the challenges one has faced, people are rising to the occasion. So,
जरा ये गरम करना बूंदी
हाँ, सब खाना खाने का है. So he has so beautifully put it that I think it's a very exciting budget. I think there is a lot the government will depend on the public. I think they have really thrown the gauntlet in one way. They have also, I think, shot themselves in the foot when it comes to privatization. One needs to see where the rubber meets the road. I think it's going to be a joint effort. And from what I see, I share his optimism. And of course, there'll be glitches. But I think going forward, certainly the trend is going to continue. And I think the upward trend will reflect not only on the stock exchange, but in general. Thank you so much, Dinesh Bhai, for sparing time and treating us to a beautiful discussion. And we really appreciate, and again, taking a cue from what Eileen said, and since I'll be there next year to haunt you, I'll make sure that you come once a month at least. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.